Well, hey everyone, this is Ryan J. Pelton from The Prolific Writer, and I am so glad that you have picked up the Confessions for the Prolific Writer infographic. I wanted to shoot a short video to talk about what this infographic is all about. Now, you may say this is just a cheap little bookmark or a little infographic. What am I supposed to do with this? Well, if you're like me and you're into creative work, you write books, you write articles, you do art, whatever it is we need some inspiration. And what I've found is that these 10 core principles, confessions, are things that I constantly come back to that have helped me write 17 books, have helped me publish hundreds of articles, and that keep me going each and every day. And so I want to just take a moment to kind of walk through these 10 core principles or confessions or philosophy for how I understand art and creativity and business, because these are things that I talk about a lot on the website, on the podcast, and in articles, and they are the ways in which I think you can become a prolific writer. And so the first one that I think is the biggest struggle for all of us is really thinking and believing that we are a writer. And then it's a mind shift. It's a change of how we look at our art. And so for whatever reason, writers are the most insecure people in the world. Is we don't want to say that we're a writer because that's weird, and it's this thing we do. We go to our closets and we go into our offices and we write these little words and tell these little stories, and it's really hard to define what a writer is. But what I've found is that if I don't believe that I'm an actual writer, and what makes me a writer is the fact that I write. It's not that I'm a New York Times bestseller. It's not that I've made millions of dollars on my books, or that I have a household name. A writer is someone who writes. And until we begin to embrace a mindset of I am a writer, we'll never do the work that we're called to do. So it's so important that we begin to talk like writers and act like writers. Well, the second principle is I will schedule my writing. I will schedule my writing. Now, this seems very obvious and very simple, but I found that as I've interacted with dozens and dozens, probably hundreds and hundreds of writers at this point, is many of them don't schedule the writing. They schedule time with family, they schedule time to watch Netflix, they schedule time to do their work. But when it comes to writing, for some reason, it doesn't get on the calendar. And it's so important, and what I've learned and the way I've been able to create and write 17 books and hundreds of articles is that my writing time is scheduled every day, because I have time carved out. And it's going to look different for you in every different time and season, but we need to get in the habit of actually putting our writing time on the schedule and be consistent. Now, it's going to look different for you. Some people write every day, some people don't. But when is that going to take place? When am I going to actually sit down and put it in the calendar and say, I'm going to write at lunchtime, I'm going to write after the kids are in bed, I'm going to write first thing in the morning? And so you need to begin to actually schedule your writing like you schedule everything else. Number 3, the third confession, I will find a tribe. I will find a tribe. You need a community to write with. You need people who have your back. You see, writing is a very individual thing. It's an individual sport, if you will. But it doesn't have to be. You need to find a community of people that are like-minded, that can support you and encourage you, that you can learn from, that you can grow from. That's really the reason I started The Prolific Writer, was I was trying to cultivate and create a community of people that believed in these philosophies even that I'm sharing here, but to learn and grow together. That the things that I've learned over the years has not been in isolation. It's not just by reading books, but it's by interacting with other writers, especially writers that are further ahead in their journey, further ahead in their careers. And I interview some of the most prolific writers on the planet. I have gained so much wisdom and knowledge from them. And I have so many friends and colleagues that I live with and I learn from and can glean from. And so you need a community to do this and to continue to be a prolific writer. You can't do it in isolation. So number 4, I will fight perfection and resistance. And this is a big one. Resistance is what Stephen Pressfield calls, it's this inner spiritual demon, this thing of when we sit down to the blank page, there's this resistance that we want to do everything else but right. And I've added perfection into that because I think perfection is why we take so much time to finish our work. is we believe it has to be perfect. But what I've learned over the years is there is no perfect book, there is no perfect story, there is no perfect article. There comes a point where we need to ship our work. We have to get it out in the world. And so we have to fight against perfectionism. We have to fight against the resistance that there's so many distractions, social media, Netflix, you name it, to keep us from our writing. But we have to get over the fact that nothing is perfect in this life. And we do the best we can. We edit, we polish, but then we have to. Number 5 is, I will finish what I start. This one is huge. That the difference between a pro and an amateur, the difference between a prolific writer and one who just writes for fun or writes when they get around to it, is someone who actually learns how to finish their work. Way back in 2012, I started my first novel, and I'd written a bunch of nonfiction stuff, and I wanted to try my hand at a novel. And I remember not finishing the novel. That I'd started it, I'd spent months on it, and I got to the end, and I just kind of fizzled out and petered out, and it just didn't happen. But I remember that the next year I joined a competition called National Novel Writing Month, and I spent 30 days writing a 50,000 word manuscript and finishing a rough draft of a novel. And there's something about finishing that opened the floodgates for completing more work, because you learn how to do it. It's like a muscle, it's a habit. I've gone through the battle, I've gone through the ups and downs, but I did it and I finished it. And I think the more you actually finish your work, the stuff that you've started, I imagine if you're like me, you would probably have a hard drive cluttered with unfinished stories, unfinished novels, unfinished nonfiction books, whatever it is, articles. But it's learning how to finish what you start. And I think when you begin to finish what you start, you are on the road to prolific writer status. Number 6, I will keep learning. There's a lot of arrogance in the art world and in the writing community. That this assumption that maybe if I went to college and I have an English degree or I have an MFA or I read certain books, that somehow I'm done learning, I'm done growing. But I want to say, and this is why I have this infographic and why we look at these confessions often, is how am I growing in craft? How am I learning from other people? How am I growing by actually writing? How am I reading books, taking courses, doing that in community with my tribe? Is we can't stop learning. And we have to learn craft, yes, but we also have to learn marketing. We have to learn business. We have to learn how to brand ourselves so that we can get our work out in the world, because we have an important message that we want to share. And so all these things are about learning and growing and getting the information, getting the knowledge so that I can continue to be the best writer that I can be. And I think a lot of times writers also, the other part of that is being readers, is learning from reading. Is that we can get lazy and think, well, I need time to write, so I just write, but you need to be a reader and a learner as well. Number 7, I will ship and share my work. This is the hardest one of them all. You've labored over this article, you've labored over this novel, you've labored over this short story or nonfiction book that's going to change the world. And there's fear, there's trepidation. What if it stinks? What if no one reads it? But there comes a point you have to ship and share your work. You have to get it out into the world. Remember, one of the principles is there is no perfect book. There is no perfection. We have to ship and we have to share. This is essential for the prolific writer. That people need to see your work. They need to get their eyes on work. They need to get their hands on their work. And there's also, as I mentioned before, the floodgates do open when we ship our work, because we learn how to deal with criticism. We learn how to deal with bad reviews, but we have to get in the habit of actually sharing and saying, I worked on this thing. Here's this thing, whether people love it or not, but I ship and I share my work. Number 8, I will keep track. Now this is going to look different for everyone. I know we're artists, we're creative, we don't do Excel spreadsheets, but keeping track is about looking at word counts. Am I actually producing the work that I think I'm producing? What's my production schedule? Am I going to, how many books am I going to write this year? How many, am I going to blog daily? What is that going to be for me? We need to keep track. And then when you get into marketing and you get into the business side and you begin to make some money with your work, how am I keeping track of those things? How are they doing? How are they selling? Keeping track is important, because I think sometimes we fool ourselves and we think, well, I write a lot. I think I write a lot. And then you look at, how many words did you write today or this week or this month or this year, and you realize it's pretty pathetic. Or you think, I think book sales are doing okay, and you look at the sales and you see that they're not doing that well. Maybe that ad that you ran and you realize I'm just wasting money or I'm wasting time. And so keeping track is so important to really get a true picture of where you are at and where you can grow. And eventually we'll get to that growing our business part, but as you grow a publishing business, you can begin to see, how am I really doing it? Is it really happening? Is growth happening? Am I impacting more people? Am I getting more readers? Number nine, I will take breaks. Seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? And see, I'm all about being prolific. I'm all about writing hundreds of thousands of words a year, producing 17 books, hundreds of articles. I'm all about production and learning how to do that well, but also learning how to write well. But we all need breaks. And so for me, I take at least one day off during the week. It's a day I shut off. I don't create anything. I don't work. I spend time with my family and my friends, and I recharge. And I think there's a lot of burnout in the creative community. There's a lot of burnout in content creators that they just go and they just go and they go and go. And there's times we need days off. There's times we need weeks off. There's times maybe we even need months off to reset, to go on a vacation, to get perspective. So you need to build in time to take a break and invest in people and relationships. Writing's important, creation is important, but it's not our total identity, that we have to find space to rest. And then lastly, the last confession is, I will live. Very similar to number 9, but I will live. I'm not just a writer, even though that's our first confession. I'm a writer. I'm gonna write because writers write. But you need to live and I need to live. We need to go and travel. We need to go and experience things. We need to go and learn new skills. We need to be in the lives of people. Some of the best writers are people that live. They don't just write, but they go and they try things and they get involved in causes and they serve people and they help people and they get involved in the lives of people. They invest in their marriages and their kids. And so we have to live our lives. And I think the best writing always comes from a life that is worth living and a life that is full. So we have to live. So I wrote these 10 confessions because I want you to keep them nearby. I want you to read them. I want you to think on them. I want you to say them to yourself often. And I think they're the key and the path and the philosophy to become a prolific writer. And this is Ryan J. Pelton from the Prolific Writer. I am so glad that you are on the journey with me. If you need anything or you need help with anything, please hit me up on social media or email. I'd love to chat. God bless. I'll talk to you real soon.